"You are completely useless." The harsh accusation sliced through the diner's bustling morning chatter. This was no mere scolding. It was the prelude to an act of shocking entitlement. As a wealthy socialite, Lexa Harrow unleashed a stinging slap across the face of a young waitress, Mara, over a trivial error. But the true depths of their depravity would soon be revealed. When Mara instinctively dropped to her knees, not to cower, but to shield her sick, whimpering puppy, Scout, from further harm, Lexa's arrogant boyfriend, Brent Wallace, committed an act so despicable it froze the entire room. With a sneer, he delivered a brutal kick, aimed squarely at Mara as she lay vulnerable, her body curled around the tiny, trembling dog. Brent truly believed his family's immense fortune and his father's iron grip on the city's power structure rendered him untouchable, above all consequence. What he utterly failed to grasp was the silent, formidable presence seated mere feet behind him at the very same counter. This man was no ordinary patron. He was Jack Ryland, a retired Navy SEAL, a man whose quiet vigilance was about to shatter their illusions of impunity and bring an entire corrupt city to its long-overdue reckoning. Before we delve deeper into this tale of courage and comeuppance, please remember to hit that like button, repost, or share this story with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more narratives that resonate. We're always eager to connect with our audience. Where are you watching from today? Drop your country in the comments below. It truly warms our hearts to see how far these stories travel across the globe. Now, without further ado, let's return to Mara's pivotal morning. Mara, her shoulders aching and eyes heavy-lidded, was deep into her second consecutive shift at the Blue Harbor Diner, the aroma of stale coffee and sizzling bacon a constant companion. Every single hour she toiled, every plate she cleared, was a desperate measure to bridge the gap of her overdue rent and, more critically, to amass enough for the mounting veterinary bills for her precious German Shepherd pup, Scout. He was a mere 10-week-old bundle of soft fur and anxious whines, currently curled up in a small, worn blanket within a wicker basket, discreetly tucked away behind the main counter. Scout was gravely ill, his tiny body racked with a persistent fever, and Mara had pleaded with her gruff but ultimately empathetic manager to allow him nearby. It was the only viable way she could possibly earn a living while simultaneously providing the constant, watchful care his fragile condition demanded. The thought of leaving him alone, sick and vulnerable, gnawed at her, a constant ache beneath her professional smile. The familiar chime of the bell above the diner door usually signaled new customers, but this particular jingle struck Mara with a cold premonition. Trouble had just walked in, trailing an unmistakable aura of entitled arrogance. It was Lexa Harrow, the notorious daughter of the city's most influential and wealthiest magnate, a woman whose every whim seemed to manifest as law. By her side sauntered Brent Wallace, her equally privileged boyfriend, whose family commanded such power that they practically held the local police force on their personal payroll. They didn't just walk in. They strutted, surveying the cozy diner with the disdainful air of conquerors assessing their latest acquisition. Indoors, their designer sunglasses remained firmly affixed, obscuring their eyes but doing little to mask the palpable smugness and overt disdain that dripped from their every movement. They were a walking, breathing embodiment of privilege and contempt. Mara, despite the knot tightening in her stomach, somehow managed to conjure a professional smile as she approached their booth, notepad at the ready. Lexa began to rattle off her order, her tone sharp, rapid-fire, and laced with an icy disdain, as if addressing a particularly detested servant. She deliberately made it convoluted, a labyrinth of substitutions and specific demands designed to trip up any ordinary server. Mara, concentrating intensely, repeated the complex order back not once, but twice, meticulously clarifying each detail, determined to get it precisely right. She double-checked with the kitchen. Finally, when the carefully prepared plate and beverage arrived, a wave of relief washed over her until her eyes caught one minuscule oversight. The iced tea lacked a single decorative lemon wedge. Before Mara could even form the first syllable of an apology, before she could even process the missing garnish, Lexa's hand flew, connecting with a brutal, open-handed smack across Mara's cheek. The force of the blow echoed through the quiet corner, so jarring that even Scout, nestled in his basket, let out a tiny, frightened whimper. "You had one job," Lexa snarled, her voice a low, venomous hiss. "Just one." The immediate, searing pain blossomed across Mara's cheek, hot and humiliating. Her eyes welled with an involuntary sting, but years of hardship had taught her to swallow her protests. She stood rooted for a split second, then silently turned, taking a ragged, calming breath, and headed back towards the service station to retrieve the forgotten lemon. It was in that agonizing moment, as she forced herself to resume her task, that a sound, faint but utterly heartbreaking, reached her ears. Scout, her sick pup, let out a soft, weak cry, a sound of pure distress, barely managing to lift his tiny head from the blanket. All professional pretense vanished. Mara rushed back to him, dropping instinctively to her knees beside his basket, her hands gently, protectively, covering his small, trembling body, her heart hammering with fear. It was then that Brent, his attention drawn by Scout's weak whimper, finally noticed the small, shivering pup. His sneer deepened into a snarl. "What's that mutt doing here?" he barked, his voice filled with disgust. "He's sick," Mara whispered, her voice tight with a desperate plea, her hands still cradling Scout. I just need to keep an eye on him." Brent took a deliberate step closer, his eyes cold and contemptuous. "People like you shouldn't be allowed to own dogs," he scoffed, his gaze sweeping over Mara's worn uniform, judging her entire existence. "You can't even afford your own life." As if on cue, Scout let out another piteous, weak whine from under Mara's hands. Brent's face twisted, his annoyance boiling over into outright malice. And then, without a shred of hesitation or humanity, he raised his foot. He kicked her, hard, directly into her side as she knelt defenseless. Mara let out a choked gasp, instantly curling her body around her tiny pup, taking the full force of the brutal blow with her shoulder and ribs. Her resolve was absolute. Scout would not be hurt. The sheer brutality of the act plunged the entire diner into an instant, stunned silence, so profound that the clatter of a cook dropping a spatula behind the counter echoed like a gunshot. A mother instinctively reached across her table, covering her young child's eyes, shielding innocence from such ugliness. Across from the sickening scene, Lexa Harrow, far from horrified, allowed a slow, cruel smirk to spread across her lips, clearly relishing the moment of unadulterated power and pain. But in his arrogant satisfaction, Brent Wallace had just committed a fatal, unforgivable error. He had been so consumed by his own petty cruelty that he completely failed to notice the man who sat quietly at the counter directly behind him. This man possessed a jawline sculpted from granite, impeccably cropped dark hair, and an almost unnerving stillness that radiated an unspoken authority. He carried himself with a quiet, observant intensity, the kind of presence that commanded respect without a single uttered word, causing even the rowdiest, most boisterous truckers to subtly adjust their posture. His name was Jack Ryland, a retired Navy SEAL, and in his formidable presence, violence against a defenseless woman or a helpless animal was simply unacceptable. It was an affront he could not tolerate. Jack Ryland, a figure of silent, coiled power, rose slowly from his stool. There was no theatricality, no sudden burst of anger, but rather a deliberate, controlled calm that, to those truly paying attention, was far more terrifying than any overt display of rage. He didn't shout, didn't make a scene, didn't even adopt a threatening stance. He simply, inexorably, began to walk towards Brent Wallace, his every step purposeful and measured. "Apologize." Jack's voice was low, yet resonated with an undeniable command, cutting through the stunned silence. Brent, still high on his surge of self-importance, scoffed, a dismissive sound of utter contempt. "Do you even know who my father is?" he sneered, clearly expecting the question alone to halt any further challenge. Jack's gaze, steady and unflinching, met Brent's. "Don't care," he stated flatly, his words devoid of emotion, yet carrying the weight of absolute finality. Lexa, recovering her composure slightly, crossed her arms, attempting to reassert their perceived dominance. "This doesn't concern you," she declared, her voice sharp. Jack simply ignored Lexa, stepping fluidly between the two bullies and the still kneeling Mara, instantly becoming a formidable shield. He towered over Brent, his presence suddenly immense, his shadow falling ominously over the younger man. His voice dropped to an even lower register, barely above a whisper, yet each word was delivered with deadly precision, echoing with an iron will. "It concerns me the second someone hurts a woman who is protecting her dog," he articulated, his eyes fixed on Brent. Enraged by the defiance, Brent, fueled by a lifetime of never being challenged, impulsively lunged forward, attempting to shove Jack away. It was a monumentally bad decision. Before Brent's hand could even make contact, Jack's own hand moved with lightning-fast, almost imperceptible speed, catching Brent's wrist midair. With a single, brutal, controlled twist, Jack applied pressure to a vulnerable joint, and Brent's arrogant defiance instantly crumbled into a yelp of pain as he dropped abruptly to his knees, his face contorted. A collective gasp rippled through the entire diner, a wave of stunned realization. Lexa, who had been watching with a triumphant sneer, stumbled backward, suddenly pale, the self-assured smirk replaced by genuine, dawning fear. Jack leaned down, his face mere inches from the now kneeling, humiliated Brent. His voice so quiet it was barely a whisper, yet each syllable was delivered with chilling, unwavering intent. "You kick her again," he warned, his eyes like flint. "And I'll personally make sure the only thing you're stepping into for the foreseeable future is a maximum security prison cell." Brent, his wrist throbbing, tried desperately to salvage some shred of his rapidly evaporating arrogance. He stammered, his voice cracking with fear and bravado. "My father. He'll end you. He'll ruin everything you have." Jack, seemingly unimpressed, released Brent's twisted wrist with a gentle shove, letting him collapse fully onto the grimy diner floor. "Your father," Jack stated, his voice now a calm, unwavering pronouncement, "won't be able to save you from the federal charges I'm about to file." With the immediate threat neutralized, Jack turned his attention to Mara. He reached out a steady hand, gently helping her to her feet. She winced, a sharp intake of breath betraying the pain in her ribs and shoulder from Brent's kick. But the moment she was upright, Scout, still weak, managed to lift his small head and offer a feeble, grateful lick to her chin, a silent testament to her unwavering protection. Jack then knelt, his movements surprisingly gentle for a man of his imposing stature, and carefully checked the trembling pup. He placed a large, calloused hand against Scout's tiny body, immediately feeling the alarming heat of a persistent fever. "He needs a vet," Jack declared, his voice firm and unequivocal. "And he needs one now." Mara nodded, tears finally brimming in her eyes, a mixture of pain, relief, and renewed fear for Scout. "But I don't have," she stammered, the financial burden of veterinary care weighing heavily. "I've got it," Jack interjected, his voice quiet but decisive, cutting off her anxious protests. "Let's go." As Jack, Mara, and the basket containing the ailing Scout turned to leave the stunned diner, Lexa, her face still pale but her entitlement slowly returning, desperately tried to regain some semblance of control. "You can't just walk out of here," she shrieked, her voice regaining its shrill edge. "We'll tell the police you attacked us. You'll regret this." Jack paused deliberately in the doorway, his silhouette framed against the morning light. Slowly, he raised his smartphone, a simple gesture that nonetheless sent a jolt of dread through Lexa. "I've already recorded every single word," he stated calmly, his voice ringing with cold authority. "Every hit, every kick." Lexa's face, already ashen, visibly crumbled, her carefully constructed facade shattering. Then Jack delivered the final, devastating blow. "And the police chief you're about to call," he added, his gaze piercing. "He's already under federal investigation. And he concluded, allowing his words to hang heavy in the air, "am the one leading it." The diner erupted, not in chaos, but in a collective, shocked murmur, a wave of stunned disbelief and dawning comprehension washing over the patrons. Jack Ryland wasn't merely a retired SEAL intervening on behalf of justice. He was a silent force, a key player working covertly with a dedicated team of federal investigators. His mission: to systematically expose the deep-seated corruption that had poisoned the city for decades, a web of illicit dealings that inextricably linked Brent's powerful father and Lex's seemingly untouchable family business. The wheels of justice, long stalled by influence and intimidation, began to turn with breathtaking speed. Within mere hours, Brent Wallace and Lexa Harrow, stripped of their privilege and power, were taken into federal custody. Their humiliated mugshots, a stark contrast to their usual polished public images, were splashed across every local news outlet and viral on the internet before the sun had even set. Overnight, the foundations of their families' once impregnable empires began to visibly fracture and crumble under the weight of relentless scrutiny. Multiple high-ranking police officers, long believed to be untouchable, were immediately suspended, and a cascade of long-dormant investigations, once mysteriously closed, were swiftly reopened. And then there was Scout. Thanks to Jack's timely intervention, the tiny pup received immediate, life-saving medical care. A severe, rapidly spreading infection was identified and treated, caught just in the nick of time, turning the tide of his critical condition. Jack, true to his word and his newfound protective instinct, remained a steadfast presence. He accompanied Mara through every anxious vet visit, sat patiently through every recovery day, offering quiet support and reassurance. He was there for every terrified moment Mara thought she might lose her precious companion, a silent anchor in her storm of fear. His calm strength was a balm to her frayed nerves. Weeks later, the transformation was undeniable. Scout, no longer a fragile, trembling pup, was now a picture of vibrant health and boundless energy, his German shepherd intelligence shining in his bright eyes. His tail, a blur of joyous motion, wagged furiously the moment Jack walked through the diner door, and he bolted straight into the man's waiting arms, an undeniable bond forged in crisis. Mara, watching the heartwarming reunion, felt a profound warmth bloom in her chest, a genuine, unburdened smile gracing her lips, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. "You know," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion, "you truly saved both of us." Jack shook his head gently, a rare, understated smile playing on his lips. "You saved him," he corrected, looking from Mara to the happy pup. "I just stepped in when some people forgot what being human actually means." Scout, as if understanding every word, barked happily, nudging his wet nose first against Mara's hand, then Jack's, then gently pushing their hands together, an unspoken, innocent gesture that seemed to playfully decide their futures for them. And so, in a city once choked by the iron grip of unchecked wealth and ruthless intimidation, a humble waitress, a quiet but formidable Navy SEAL, and a spirited German shepherd pup, against all odds, became the unlikely catalysts for a new chapter. It was the start of something pure and resilient, a movement that could not be bought, bullied, or broken. It was the dawning of true justice, the blossoming of real courage, and a hopeful new beginning that none of them, in their wildest dreams, had ever seen coming. This powerful story has resonated with millions, echoing in hearts across the globe. If it touched yours, please show your support with a like, drop a yes in the comments to let us know, and subscribe or follow us for more amazing, inspiring stories like this one.